Hi, David Odell here with Odell Complete Concrete. This is part 2 of a 2-part series, and it's pour day. This is the fun part. Getting to this point is hard, but then you get to do the pour and stamp the concrete. That's when you really feel like you're going to accomplish something. We're going to be using a wood plank stamp, 1 foot wide planks. It's going to be an integral color, a medium gray. It's from Davis Color. And then also we're going to use an antique release agent from Brick Form. And that one is called Smoky Blue. There's the mats. We're going to lay a little plastic around the house to prevent splattering. Also a little bit on the sidewalk so we can get in and out of the concrete without tracking wet concrete all over everything else. Priming the pump right now. Put most of the water into the wheelbarrow. That's your primer to lubricate the hose to prevent it from clogging. And now we can start filling up the hole. It looks pretty dark here. However, as it cures out, it's going to get much lighter. And we're going to show that too. We're going to show 30 days after this is cured out, and we put the sealer on here. As we pour this out, we're just lifting the rebar. The reason we like to do it that way is to make sure that the rebar is not too high. Because I've seen in a lot of cases when the rebar's on dobies in a 4-inch slab, especially outdoors, the rebar will start to rust, and when that happens, it'll explode through the surface of the concrete. So you definitely don't want steel too high in a slab, especially an outdoor slab. Better off low than high. Got a little 2-foot level working there, Milwaukee red stick. It's a level and a rod board basically all in one. Now we have a wood bull float here, 4-foot wood. We have about 2.5-inch slope on this patio in the distance that we have here. We've got a 4-inch step out the door and a 6-inch down to the existing sidewalk. And that ended up giving us about 2.5-inch slope. We're going to be putting one control joint in this slab as well. The placement of that joint's going to be crucial because of the 1-foot plank stamps. We want to line it up on the edge of one of the mats. And we know that they're 1 foot wide, so we're just going to come out 8 feet off of the doors because we're turning the planks the other direction. And if we come out 8 feet, we got 8 mats at 1 foot, and it should line up on the joint. That's the goal. First step is going around it with a hand float. Then using a walking edger. This is a 10-inch wide, 1/2-inch radius walking edger. Now we're going to get ready to lay out the joint line. That'll line up on one of the sides of the 1 foot mat. That's an 8-foot reach out right there. And then we got 8 foot on the other side. This joiner's 6 foot long, so it's pretty easy to line it up without using a dry line. A lot of times on a small joiner, walking joiner, you'd have to snap a dry line on it. But with a cutter this long, you can look down it like looking down a rifle and hit your target at the other end. In this case, the target's where the tape dropped down. This cutter is just to get your first cut straight because of its length. It also is deeper than your typical finished product. Their finished product will only be a 3/4 deep, 1/2 inch radius. This one's cutting about 2 inches, so you're getting a good break through your aggregate. And when you do that, you could even cream that in and it's still going to crack straight, even though you don't see it, because the aggregate's been separated all the way down. That's called the weakened plane joint. Now we're getting out there on the knee boards, and at that time is usually about the same time to start thinking about stripping and facing. So we're going to start wrecking a few forms here and there and get ready to pull them off at a moment's notice. Now we're just doing a little touch-ups with the funny trowel. Doesn't have to be a really super hard trowel finish because you got to get your stamps out there and they have to be able to go into the concrete. So you just want it nice and flat and an even finish. And then you can start walking your mats in. In a big area, you'd start pretty early. If you had one set of mats and 1 pounder, you'd want to start with almost a walk-in, and then as you get further along, you could start using your pounder to keep the impression even throughout. Now this is a nice technique how to throw your powder, is with a brush. That way it goes out nice and even. You don't waste a lot of material. This stuff, and I've did it before, after you're all stamped up, and if the wind hasn't blown and a lot of leaves hasn't blown on top of the concrete, if you come back a couple days later, you could sweep up the excess powder and actually reuse it. You only lose probably half of what you threw down. Because our form is perfectly parallel with the house and the other form is square, all we have to do now is line up our mat with the form and we know it's straight with everything that we set up here. So all the joints of the wood plank stamps will be staggered. Just like a typical, if you were working with wood, it would be the same thing. Although your staggers would line up because your joists underneath would be in one place. Now here's a technique, the roll-up technique. If you're working solo and you're moving around a lot of tools, you can roll them up like this and unroll them in place. Now when you're out there walking on the mats, you can usually feel it through your feet, how soft the concrete is and how hard you really need to hit it. Also, by the way your your pounder's hitting the concrete, you'll know if it's making contact throughout and if it's sinking in enough. So that all those little details will determine how hard you have to hit it and how consistent the whole pattern will be out throughout the whole pour. So a little bit of this job's in the sunlight, so that's going to dry a lot quicker where it's in the sun. So we're going to have to hit a little softer in the shaded and a little bit harder where it's in the sun to keep it uniform and the impression all the way through. Now here's a chisel on the touch-ups. Usually on your ends where you're overlapping the form, you'll have to do some touch-ups because the mat's not sinking below that top of that 2x4. So it usually gets light on the edges. So that's why you got to concentrate on those where you're coming over a form. Also, you'll lose a little texture too coming over the top. So if you got a hand mat, you can always touch up along the edges with that too, to make sure you got good grain coming inside of that 2x. Also the joint, we're going to go through that with the chisel as well, because a lot of times they close up when you go over them, and then you just run your chisel through to open them back up a little here and there. Also it sets that secondary color into that joint, so you don't get a shiner of the single color through there. Now when you end up working yourself into the corner over there, what happens is you're going to have to spend a little more time detailing it out where you hit the house and working your way out of there. Just working out of the corner probably takes as long as the entire stamping to that point. Now on the sides, we can texture it. You know, we're going to face it, run texture along the sides, bring the joints down on the face. We had a pressure washer, and I think we start with the pressure washer here, but it fails on us, and it's a Ryobi. So we're gonna do it the old-fashioned way, because you can rinse these without a pressure washer, and it's just a little bit more elbow grease with a broom and water, but you get the same results. It just takes more water, a little more labor, but same results. Then if you really want to knock the secondary color off, you can add a little muriatic acid to water, probably about a 10-to-1 solution, and you can really knock off that secondary color real quickly. In this case, we're just going to use a stiff broom and water. And this is about 4 days after the pour, so it's had time to cure up. So you're not going to have to worry about scratching it or damaging it when you're doing your rinse. We're going to have to wait about 30 more days on this, and then we're going to put a nice lacquer-based wet look sealer on it. And what I do with the lacquer base is I dilute it somewhat, because I'm going to be applying it with just a typical garden sprayer, a hand pump up garden sprayer. And in order to do that with a lot of the lacquer base, they're pretty thick. So diluting it gives you a nice fine even coat, and then you can just put multiple layers on there. So it looks like the joint lined up perfectly on the edge of a wood plank. So here's what it looks like after you've rinsed the majority of the secondary color off. You're starting to show a little bit of the base color, which is a lighter tone. after that rinse, we waited a full 24 hours before we came back to put this sealer on here. And this is a lacquer based wet look. We've diluted it. We've diluted about 25% with acetone. And these little plastic garden sprays are about $10 a piece. You only get one use out of them because the solvents in the sealer will eat the hose, and the hose will actually explode on you if you leave it in there too long. So you got about 2 hours before that hose will come apart on you. You can get a metal pump up sprayer, but they're over $100 a piece. So I usually buy 10 of the plastic ones for the same price. So there it is. Turned out beautiful. Big improvement from the original wood. Anyway, thank you for watching. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification button. That way you'll be notified when our next upload goes online. Thank you. Have a good one.